The winds were cold in the north, and war had left no field untouched. Robb Stark stood in the great hall of Riverrun, his sword belt resting heavy on his hips, eyes fixed on the map in front of him. Across the table stood Robert Baratheon, no longer the drunken king he had become in the original timeline, but now a hardened warrior again, with fury burning in his eyes. This story takes place in a world where Robert never died on that hunt. Instead, he discovered Cersei's betrayal early, how his children were not truly his. He rode north, leaving King's Landing behind in chaos, knowing he would return not as a puppet king, but as a conqueror. When he met Robb Stark at Riverrun, their cause united: justice, vengeance, and the end of the Lannister grip. "I should have burned Tywin alive years ago," Robert muttered, gripping his goblet. "But now we'll do worse. We'll break him." Robb nodded. "He's moving through the Riverlands. He thinks he'll crush me like a boy playing at war. But what if we make him come to the wrong battlefield?" A spark lit in Robert's eyes. "You're speaking of a trap?" "Exactly," Robb said. "We lure Tywin's army into the Whispering Wood, the same way I once caught Jaime Lannister. But this time, we'll make it bigger. We won't just capture them, we'll destroy them." Robert smiled the way only a warrior king could. "I like this, Stark. Let's bring the lion to slaughter." Over the next few days, the plan was forged in silence. Ravens flew. Scouts watched every Lannister movement. Tywin Lannister, proud and cold, was leading 20,000 men through the southern Riverlands, aiming to crush Robb's army before it could regroup. But Robb wasn't where Tywin thought he was. Using false camps, burning wagons, and staged retreats, Robb's men played the part of a panicked force on the run. Tywin took the bait, thinking he had Robb trapped between the river and the hills. What he didn't know was that Robert Baratheon and 10,000 Stormlanders had come up from the south, hiding in the wooded passes. The stage was set near a narrow valley called Stone Hollow, surrounded by thick trees and high ridges. To Tywin, it looked like an easy battlefield, open enough to charge but closed enough to trap a fleeing army. But he was the one being trapped. On the eve of the battle, Robb and Robert stood together, side by side under the cold stars. "I never thought I'd fight beside a wolf," Robert said, drinking from his flask. "And I never thought I'd trust a king," Robb replied with a small grin. They shared a moment of silence, knowing what tomorrow would bring. If their plan failed, both their armies could be destroyed. But if it worked, they would cut the head off the lion once and for all. Dawn broke with fog crawling low across the valley. Tywin's banners moved like a tide of red and gold, unaware that death watched from the trees. From the ridge above, Robert's hammer was ready. In the woods on both sides, Stark bowmen waited, silent as ghosts. As Tywin's men marched deeper, drums echoed once, then twice. Then came the war horn, loud, deep, full of rage. Robert charged down the slope with the force of a mountain. Robb's men burst from the woods like wolves released from a cage. Arrows rained down, horses screamed, and chaos took hold. Tywin's face went pale for the first time in years. He had walked right into the trap. The first screams echoed through the valley like cracks of thunder. Tywin Lannister's army had barely raised shields before death fell from above. Arrows blackened the sky, striking men and horses alike. Panic surged like a disease. Soldiers tripped over each other, some trying to turn back, others frozen in fear, realizing they were surrounded. Tywin sat atop his black warhorse, golden armor gleaming even in the smoke and chaos. His face always unreadable, now tensed. He saw the trap for what it was. The valley he thought was a cage for Robb Stark had become a coffin for his own men. "Sound the retreat," he roared, his voice cutting through the mayhem. But it was too late. Robert Baratheon came down the ridge like a thunderstorm, his warhammer smashing skulls, his men roaring like wild beasts. He had not led an army like this in years, but the fire of the rebellion still lived in him, and now with rage aimed straight at Tywin, it burned brighter than ever. "Lannisters, to me!" shouted Sir Keevan, Tywin's brother, trying to rally the broken ranks. He barely managed to pull a line together before Robb's cavalry swept in from the right flank. Gray cloaks fluttering, swords drawn, faces cold like the north wind. Robb Stark rode with his direwolf, Grey Wind, sprinting ahead, tearing through men like a shadow of death. Robb's blade struck quick and clean, trained by war, sharpened by grief. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a Stark of Winterfell, and today the wolves hunted lions. The center of Tywin's force began to collapse. The golden banners dipped and fell. Horses panicked. Soldiers screamed for mercy, some throwing down their swords. But the Northern and Stormlander forces had no time for mercy. They remembered the burned villages, the slaughtered peasants, the red wedding that had never happened in this version of time. But the Lannister cruelty was legend, and it was being answered with steel. Tywin tried to regroup his remaining troops toward a rocky outcrop to the east, where the land narrowed and formed a natural defensive corner. But Robb had predicted this. From the cliffs above, a second wave appeared. Archers led by the Blackfish, Sir Brynden Tully. They rained fire-tipped arrows down on the fleeing soldiers. The rocky outcrop became a fiery trap of its own, screams rising as flames took hold. Robert fought like the Robert of old. Back when he had broken Rhaegar at the Trident, his hammer crushed men in golden armor. He roared curses, named dead friends, and brought vengeance to every swing. His cloak was red with blood, his eyes burning. At one point, his horse was cut down under him, and Robert fought on foot, laughing as he tore through two knights with brutal swings. A Lannister squire tried to run. Robert grabbed him by the neck and threw him into a cartwheel. "Tell your Lord Tywin," he spat, "this is the price of arrogance." Far behind the lines, Tywin saw the slaughter, the chaos, the hopelessness. He clenched his fists. He had underestimated the boy, and he had forgotten what Robert Baratheon truly was, a beast of war. The lion had grown fat and proud, and now the stag and the wolf had brought him to his knees. "Your orders, my lord?" asked a trembling bannerman. Tywin's voice was cold. "Break through the southern pass. If we can't win, we survive." But even that was stolen from him. From the southern side of the valley, fresh horses came thundering in, led by Lord Renly Baratheon, who had brought 1,000 of the Reach's cavalry after being sent by Robert days before. Renly, dressed in green and gold, crashed into the retreating Lannister rear, sealing the trap completely. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The lions were penned, and the walls were made of blades. Tywin's personal guard fought valiantly, but even they were cut down one by one. Finally, with his horse shot out from under him, Tywin was dragged from the dirt by Northern soldiers. He stood tall, bloodied but not broken, until he saw Robb Stark ride toward him, his direwolf beside him, and Robert Baratheon limping behind, warhammer on his shoulder. Tywin met their eyes and said nothing, but his silence could not protect him now. "You thought we were boys," Robb said, his voice sharp, "but you're just an old man hiding behind gold." Robert added, "And now you'll answer for all of it." The war wasn't over yet, but the lion's pride was broken. Tywin Lannister had been caught, and Westeros would never forget this day. The battlefield was quiet now. Only smoke rising from burned wagons and the cries of dying men filled the morning air. Bodies of Lannister soldiers lay scattered across Stone Hollow like fallen gold coins, their red cloaks soaked in mud and blood. Birds began to circle overhead. The crows had come for the dead. At the center of it all stood Tywin Lannister, the proud lord of Casterly Rock, now bound in chains. His golden armor, dented and scratched, reflected the fading sun like a mockery of the power he once held. His face was calm, too calm. That was what unsettled even the men guarding him. Robb Stark dismounted in front of him, wiping his blade clean. Grey Wind paced beside him, growling low. Robert Baratheon limped behind, blood still dripping from a wound in his shoulder, but his eyes burned with fire. "So this is what a lion looks like in a cage," Robert said bitterly. Tywin didn't flinch. "Enjoy your little victory, Baratheon. You've only won a battle, not the war." "Ah," Robert grunted, "but I've waited years to win this battle." He leaned closer. "You poisoned my reign. You turned my wife against me. You corrupted my kingdom with gold and fear. And now, look at you." Tywin's lip twitched. "You were never a king, just a drunk swinging a hammer and hoping it solved everything." Robb stepped forward. Enough! You'll answer to the North and the Riverlands for your crimes. My people died because of you. You butchered villages, set fire to crops, and dragged innocent men into your wars. Tywin's eyes narrowed. This is war, boy, not a song. Every move I made was for power and survival, Robert smirked. And now your survival depends on our mercy. They hauled Tywin away to a makeshift prison cart, locked in iron. His bannermen, those who lived, were stripped of their sigils and shackled. Some begged, some spat, some died where they stood. The rest marched in shame under watchful northern eyes. That night Robb sat by the fire in deep thought. Robert sat across from him, half drunk but still alert. The victory was clear, but what came next was not. We've crushed his army, captured his men, but the Lannisters still hold King's Landing, Robb said quietly. Cersei rules there, and your son, Joffrey. Robert's jaw tightened. Not my son. He's a Lannister through and through. I should have listened to Ned years ago. Gods, I was blind. You're not blind now, Robb said, but you need to be ready for what's coming. Robert looked up. What do you mean? Robb hesitated, then spoke carefully. The South doesn't love you, Robert. They fear you. But fear won't hold a kingdom together. We've won a battle, but we need the people, the lords, the alliances. Robert grunted. You're saying I need to put down the hammer and start playing the game? Robb nodded. Yes, because Cersei won't fight with swords alone. She'll use words, secrets, lies, everything. At that moment, Lord Renly stepped into the tent. They're already doing it, he said, throwing a scroll on the table. Ravens from King's Landing. Cersei is claiming we kidnapped Lord Tywin, that we attacked a peace mission. She's rallying the faith, calling for holy war. Robert laughed darkly. Holy war? She sleeps with her brother and lies to the world, and now she wants the Seven on her side? Robb frowned. She knows how to spin the story. If the small folk believe her, we'll look like rebels, usurpers, worse than Lannisters. Renly said, we need to move fast, march on King's Landing before she builds a wall of lies around the throne. Robert slammed his cup on the table. Then we march at dawn. But Robb wasn't so sure. We should use Tywin, he said slowly. Make him confess. Let the world hear what the Lion has done. Robert raised a brow. You think he'll break? Robb stared into the flames. Everyone breaks, eventually. In a cold cell beneath River Run, Tywin sat alone, chains on his wrists, torchlight flickering on the walls. He didn't look broken. He looked calculating, waiting, because even caged lions have teeth. And outside, the game was just beginning. Tywin Lannister hadn't spoken a word in 3 days. Not to the guards, not to the maesters, and not to Robb Stark, who came each morning hoping for even the slightest crack in the lion's armor. He just sat there in the cold stone cell of River Run, calm, hands folded in his lap, eyes always watching, like he was the one judging them. Robb stood behind the iron bars once again, gray wind growling low beside him. He stared at the man who had burned the Riverlands, who had ordered the deaths of thousands, and who still looked like a lord in chains. I wonder, Robb said, do you even feel guilt? Tywin finally blinked. You speak of guilt as if it has weight in war. Tell me, Lord Stark, do you feel guilt for the men you trapped and slaughtered in Stone Hollow? The ones who begged for mercy? Robb's jaw tensed. That was justice. Tywin's lips twitched into the faintest smile. Ah, so that's what we're calling vengeance these days. Robb stepped closer, voice sharp. Your army butchered entire villages. Your men hung children from trees in the Riverlands. You think this is politics? No, this is blood for blood. Tywin's eyes narrowed. And yet here I am, alive. Why not hang me from a tree too, Lord Stark? Or are you hoping to use me as a prize in your game? Robb hesitated. That was the truth, wasn't it? They needed Tywin alive, for confession, for leverage, for a chance to rip apart Cersei's lies and show the realm what the Lannisters really were. But Tywin knew that, and that made him dangerous. Before Robb could answer, a guard appeared at the stairwell. My lord, there's a raven from King's Landing. Robb took the scroll, eyes scanning quickly, and his heart dropped. Robert Baratheon was dead, murdered, poisoned during a feast at Harrenhal while meeting with southern lords to rally more support. His mouth had turned black. He died in front of 100 witnesses. Robb stared at the letter, his fingers trembling. The king was dead, and the realm would tear itself apart. The war council that night was quiet, too quiet. Renly sat with blood in his eyes, fists clenched. "It was her," he said. "Cersei. That snake. She knew she couldn't beat Robert in battle, so she used poison." Robb stood silent, his mind spinning. With Robert dead, she'll name Joffrey king. Claim the throne through her false son. "She already has," said the master, laying down another raven scroll. "Joffrey Baratheon has been crowned. Cersei is queen regent. The gold cloaks are under their control. And Tywin's death would make her stronger," Robb said, realization hitting hard. "If we execute him now, we give her a martyr. She'll use his death to unite the lords against us." "So what do we do?" Renly asked, frustration rising. Robb looked around. "We break him, force him to speak. The truth about Joffrey, about Cersei, about the war. We let the people hear it." Renly scoffed. "And you think the old lion will confess? He's more likely to bite off his tongue." But Robb had another idea. He went to the cell again, alone this time. Tywin looked up, amused. "Back so soon, boy?" Robb didn't speak. He opened a leather pouch and threw its contents onto the floor. Blackened bones. Robert's remains, burned and cold. Tywin stared at them for a long moment, then looked up, his face blank. "Poison," Robb said. "Your daughter did this. To her king, the father of her supposed children. Does that shame you at all, Lord Tywin? That your legacy is nothing but murder and incest?" Tywin stood slowly. "My legacy," he said softly, "is still stronger than yours. You think the South will follow you? A northern boy with a dead king and a dead rebellion? You are alone, Robb Stark. And soon, you'll be buried under the same stones as your father." Robb stared at him, fury and doubt twisting inside him. But Tywin had made one mistake. He assumed Robb had no teeth left. Robb leaned in close. "You're right. I'm alone. But I only need one thing to win this war. One voice. Yours. And when I rip the truth from your mouth, I'll show it to the world, inch by inch." As Robb walked away, Tywin finally looked unsure. For the first time, the lion felt the walls closing in. In the Red Keep, the Iron Throne sat colder than ever, yet Cersei Lannister warmed it with fire in her veins and poison on her tongue. Draped in black silk, gold chains heavy on her neck, she stood tall before the court. Her face was a mask of grief, but her eyes gleamed with triumph. "King Robert Baratheon," she announced to the hall, voice thick with rehearsed sorrow, "was taken from us by traitors, poisoned at Harrenhal by cowards hiding behind smiles. His death is an act of war." Joffrey sat beside her, dressed in royal gold, his chin raised like a boy trying to mimic his grandfather's scowl. Behind him stood Sir Meryn Trant and the full strength of the King's Guard, Lannister loyal to the bone. Cersei's voice rang out again. "And now they hold my father hostage. Lord Tywin Lannister, the hand of the king, the realm's true protector, chained like a dog by northern savages and false rebels." The lords shifted, murmurs echoing through the hall. She raised a letter in her hand, the same raven-sent message Robb had delivered to the southern lords days before, begging for negotiations and offering Tywin's confessions in exchange for peace. Cersei ripped the letter in two. "I will not bargain with murderers. I will not kneel to wolves in lion's skin." The court erupted in cheers, or at least it was forced to. Behind the scenes, Cersei moved quicker than ever. She bribed the High Septon with golden land, promised the Tyrells more reach in the Crown lands, and whispered to Dorne of revenge for Elia Martell, blaming Robert and his old allies for it all. War was no longer just about armies, it was about stories, and Cersei had the best one, but not everyone believed her. Back in River Run, Robb Stark stood beside Tywin's cell once more. But he wasn't alone this time. The room was lit brighter than usual, and across from Tywin sat a scribe with ink and parchment. Chains clinked as Tywin lifted his head. "What's this?" he said, voice sharp. "A confession," Robb replied coldly. Tywin's brows rose. "You still think I'll beg before you? You've lost your king. You've lost your allies. You're a boy playing judge." "No," Robb said, pulling up a stool. "I'm not the judge. The people are." He reached into a chest and dropped letters onto the table. Dozens of them. From Riverland's villages, from northern lords, even from Baratheon loyalists. All demanding justice, all wanting truth. Then with a nod, Robb opened the door. 4 men walked in, battered, bruised, haunted. A farmer whose family was burned by Gregor Clegane. A mother who watched her son hanged by Lannister soldiers. A maester from Harrenhal who had seen Cersei's messengers deliver the poison wine. Robb stared into Tywin's eyes. "Talk," he said, "or I start sending pieces of you to your daughter." Tywin's smile faded, but still, he said nothing. The next morning, a rider arrived in secret, hooded, cloaked in gray. It was Varys. He bowed low to Robb, ignoring the shocked looks in the war tent. Renly stepped forward, hand on his sword. "You've served the Lannisters your whole life." Varys raised his head slowly. "I serve the realm, my lords, and the realm is bleeding." Robb narrowed his eyes. "Why are you here?" Varys pulled out a scroll, sealed with a dark wax. "Because chaos is climbing fast, and the queen has made a grave error. She has overplayed her hand." He laid the scroll down. "It's proof that Cersei ordered Robert's poisoning through a Reach Lord, Sir Garland Florent. And guess who holds Garland's bastard daughter? Me." Robb's hand curled into a fist. "Why bring this now?" Varys smiled faintly. "Because I want the lioness to fall, but not to be replaced by a mad child or a warlord. You are the last player with honor on the board, Lord Stark. But if you do not act quickly, honor will bury you." Renly stepped back, stunned. Robb looked at the scroll. "Proof. Real proof." Varys whispered, "Use Tywin's silence against him. Let the realm believe he confessed, whether he did or not. Say what needs to be said. Expose the queen. Shatter her mask." Robb stared into the fire. "Are you saying I should lie?" Varys gave the faintest nod. "Sometimes, my lord, a well-placed lie can be mercy." And just like that, the game changed again. The raven left River Run under the cover of fog, its black wings slicing through the gray morning sky, carrying with it a letter sealed with the Darewolf sigil of House Stark. But this was no ordinary message. It was a confession, handwritten by Robb Stark, dictated not by Tywin Lannister, but by Varys the Spider. It was a lie, a beautifully crafted, venom-laced lie. Inside, it claimed that Tywin Lannister had confessed to all, orchestrating the war to gain power over Robert, covering up his daughter's incestuous relationship with Jaime, forging Joffrey's birthright, and, worst of all, helping plan Robert's murder with Cersei's knowledge. The letter was meant not just for lords, but for the people. It was copied and sent to every corner of Westeros, taverns, septs, brothels, castles. From Old Town to White Harbor, the lion's name turned black in the mouths of the small folk. The effect was immediate. The streets of King's Landing boiled with rumor. "They say Lord Tywin confessed under oath to the Stark boy? Cersei's boy ain't the king. He's Jaime's get. She poisoned her own husband and called it justice?" Within a week, riots erupted in Flea Bottom. The Red Keep doubled its guards. Gold Cloaks began arresting anyone speaking the rumors aloud. But whispers travel faster than blades, and once a lie tastes like truth, no sword can silence it. Back in River Run, Tywin sat alone in his cell as a copy of the forged confession was read aloud to him. His face remained still, but his eyes grew colder with each sentence. When the reading ended, he looked up at Robb Stark through the bars. "You'll damn yourself for this," he said, voice low and controlled. "I already am," Robb replied, "but I'll bring your daughter with me." Tywin leaned forward, chains clinking softly. "You think the realm will stay with you when they learn the truth? When they see that you forged a lie to win a war? Robb didn't blink. By then, they'll be too far gone to care. And for the first time, Tywin Lannister looked beaten, not by swords, not by fire, but by the very thing he had always used to control Westeros: perception. At King's Landing, Cersei was unraveling. She stormed through the halls of the Red Keep, throwing goblets and screaming at servants. Qyburn tried to calm her. Sir Meryn stood silent, but nothing helped. She had underestimated Robb. She thought him a northern pup barking into the snow, but now half the realm looked at her like a villain from a bard's tale. Even Joffrey noticed. Why do they keep whispering, "Mother"? Why do they say I'm not the king? Cersei slapped him across the face. Joffrey shrieked, red-faced, "You hit the king! You are nothing without me," she hissed. "Do you hear me, Joffrey? They want your crown. They want your blood. And unless I stop them, you will be swinging from a city gate with your guts hanging out." Silence followed. Only Sir Meryn dared speak. "What will you do, your grace?" Cersei's voice turned cold. "We bleed them back." She ordered the burning of any message carrying the Stark letter. She sanctioned the arrest of any man or woman who repeated the claims. The Septs were forced to pray for the Queen's honor and denounce the traitor Robb Stark's lies. But it wasn't enough. The lie had already rotted her name. At Riverrun, Renly burst into Robb's war room, a smirk on his lips. "They're turning. Robb, Dorne has gone quiet. The Reach won't send soldiers. The Vale's ravens say they're reconsidering neutrality. This letter, it's wildfire in parchment form." Robb said nothing. He stared at the map, eyes fixed on King's Landing. Renly grinned. "You played the lion's game better than the lion himself." But Robb didn't smile. He looked up at Varys, who stood in the shadows. "What happens when they find out the truth?" Robb asked. Varys gave a soft sigh. "By then, it will no longer matter. Victory justifies the story, and stories become history." Before anyone could speak again, a horn blew from the walls. A messenger stormed in. "A rider has come. From the Vale. He carries the sigil of House Arryn." Robb stood. "Bring him in." Minutes later, a young knight entered, dusty from travel. He knelt before Robb. "Lady Lysa Arryn sends word. She is ready to declare for the north. The Eyrie will march." The room went silent. The Vale had been silent since Ned Stark's death. But now, with the lie spreading, with Cersei panicking, with the lion cornered, momentum shifted. The Starks were rising again. But outside Riverrun, under the quiet of the trees, a lone rider watched from afar. A man cloaked in black and red. A man whose face no one remembered. A dagger on his hip. A letter in his satchel. And eyes only for Robb Stark. Because every lie, even a brilliant one, comes with a price. The Vale had answered. 10,000 knights, banners of the Falcon soaring, marched through the mountain passes under the command of Lord Jon Royce. Their destination was clear, King's Landing. And behind them rode Robb Stark, the young wolf, his armor cold with northern steel and his mind sharper than ever. But war has no straight path, and behind every victory there waits a shadow with a blade. The shadow had a name once, long forgotten. He now served only whispers, whispers paid in gold from the Red Keep. His task was simple: kill Robb Stark. The price was high, the reward higher, and the chaos that would follow. Cersei would drown the realm in it if it meant keeping her crown. As the army camped outside the Trident, Robb sat in his tent, alone for once, staring at a worn letter, one of the first his father had ever sent him from King's Landing. It smelled faintly of Winterfell, of the past, of honor. But that world was gone now. "Your father played the game with truth," came a soft voice from behind him, "and lost." Robb turned to find Varys standing in the tent's corner like a ghost. Robb sighed. "And I've played with lies. What does that make me?" "Alive," Varys replied simply, "and winning." Robb studied him for a long moment. "Why do you keep helping me? You serve the Targaryens, the Lannisters. Why not stay with them?" Varys stepped forward, eyes colder than usual. "Because I serve the realm, and because you still have a chance to fix it." Robb looked back at the letter. I'm not my father. No, Varys said, but perhaps that's what the realm needs. They were interrupted by Lord Royce, armor clanking. The men are ready. We ride at first light. Robb nodded. Good. We strike hard and fast. We catch the city before Cersei can spin another story. Outside the tent, the camp settled. Torches flickered. Men whispered of home, of glory, of fear, and in the dark, the assassin moved. He wore the black of the night's watch, the hood of a traveler, and the silence of death. He slipped through the camp like a breeze, cutting a sentry's throat without a sound. Another guard fell with a soft grunt. He neared Robb's tent, blade drawn. Poison coated the edge, quicker than fire, slower than mercy. Inside, Robb slept lightly, hand on his sword. The assassin stepped in, raising the dagger. When Grey Wind lunged from the shadows, teeth tearing into flesh. The assassin screamed, slashing wildly. Robb leapt up, sword drawn, face twisted in rage. The blade met the assassin's throat before he could run. Blood spilled across the tent floor. Robb stood over the body, chest heaving. Grey Wind growled low, blood dripping from his jaws. Search him, Robb ordered. The camp came alive in seconds. Royce entered, blade raised, men shouting. Varys arrived, watching coldly as the assassin's body was turned over. A letter was found. It bore the lion's seal, Cersei's orders, the bounty, Robb's name written in Lannister red. He stared at the parchment, hands shaking not with fear but fury. She's not just fighting the war, he said. She's sending knives in the dark. Royce growled. We ride now. No more delays. But Varys placed a hand on Robb's shoulder. Wait. Robb turned, eyes flashing. She'll expect a rage-filled charge, Varys said. That's how she wins. Let me go first. Let me spread the news of this attack. Let the people know the lioness doesn't just lie, she murders in silence. Robb exhaled, steadying himself. How many more will die while we wait? Varys looked at him. Fewer. If you win with your mind, not just your sword. The next day, the assassin's body was hung from a tree near the main road. A sign was nailed to his chest. The Queen sends knives in the dark. Word spread faster than wildfire. Small folk began calling Robb the Shadowbreaker. Songs whispered of a king who survived poison and blades. And for the first time, even the streets of King's Landing began to doubt their queen. Meanwhile, inside the Red Keep, Cersei screamed at a shattered goblet. He lives! How? Sir Qyburn stepped forward. The assassin failed. The people, they're turning. She glared at him. Then we give them something worse to fear. What do you propose? Cersei smiled coldly. We unleash the mountain. Qyburn blinked. But he's barely... Finish what you started, she hissed. Turn him into a monster. If the people want to see justice, then we'll show them what our justice looks like. Far beneath the castle, in a dark room stinking of rotten blood, Gregor Clegane stirred, half dead, half alive. A new weapon, a monster in the making, and he would be waiting for Robb Stark. The banners of the North and the Vale darkened the skies as they crested the final ridge before King's Landing. From the city walls, the small folk looked out and saw something they hadn't seen since the days of Robert's Rebellion. A united army not of southern gold, but of iron and winter. Robb Stark stood at the head of his forces, his wolf banner rippling in the cold morning breeze. Beside him rode Lord Jon Royce of the Vale, grim as ever. Behind them, the airy knights formed a wall of steel, and to their left, the remaining Stormlanders rode under Renly Baratheon's green banners, the last breath of Robert's legacy. The gates of King's Landing remained shut. Inside, the city boiled with fear and suspicion. Cersei's lies had spread like wildfire, but so had the truth. The forged letter, the assassination attempt, the riots, it had all chipped away at her mask. Now she stood before the Iron Throne with Joffrey pacing nearby, furious. They're calling him the Wolf King now, Joffrey hissed. I want his head. I want all their heads. Cersei turned to him slowly, the weight of desperation sinking into her bones. She had killed her husband, poisoned her court, and drowned the truth in blood. But it wasn't enough. The lie she'd built was crumbling. "I'll protect you," she said softly, brushing his cheek, "even if it means burning this city to the ground." Qyburn appeared beside her, cloaked in filth and secrets. "It's time," he said. Cersei nodded. "Release him." Beneath the red keep, iron doors creaked open. Gregor Clegane, the mountain, emerged. No longer man, but something else. His eyes were black, his breath shallow, his armor sewn into his ruined flesh. He didn't speak. He didn't think. He simply obeyed. At dawn, Robb Stark's war horns blew across the fields. They approached the city cautiously, waiting for a reply. The gates remained closed. Then from the main road, a lone rider approached. He carried a black banner, a request for parley. Robb met him outside the camp. The man dismounted and handed him a scroll. Cersei's handwriting. "Come alone to the gates, speak as king to queen, or see your war drown in fire." Robb looked at the walls, at the city he had no desire to sack, at the people behind those stones who had suffered enough. He gave Grey Wind a final stroke, and without a word, rode alone. They met in the shadow of the gate. Cersei wore black and gold, her hair twisted in a crown of thorns. Her face was beautiful and terrifying, like a rose dipped in poison. "Robb Stark," she said, "so this is what the boy king has become." He dismounted calmly. "And this is what the queen has become, a mother who poisons kings and sends blades into the dark." She smiled coldly. "You forged a lie, boy, and the realm believed it. That makes you no better than me." "I didn't do it for power," Robb replied. "I did it to stop you." Cersei tilted her head. "You came for justice, but I have something more. Effective." She raised a hand, and from behind the gates the mountain stepped out. His armor was black and steel, his eyes soulless, his sword as long as a man was tall. Robb tensed. "You'd send this thing to settle the war?" Cersei's voice was ice. "You want the crown? Win it. Here. Now." The gates creaked open wider, forming a narrow dueling path. The crowd watched from above, holding their breath. Robb stared at the monster before him. Then he smiled, because he hadn't come alone. Grey Wind lunged out from the brush, teeth bared, fur bristling. And from the rooftops, arrows flew. Stark archers who had crept into the city during the night, led by Brynden Tully himself. The duel began. The mountain swung like a butcher, cleaving the earth, forcing Robb back. But Robb was faster, leaner, his blade dancing, cutting, striking. Grey Wind attacked from the side, tearing at armor. Arrows slammed into the mountain's chest, but he didn't fall. He roared, smashing Grey Wind with his gauntlet, sending the direwolf tumbling. Robb screamed and charged. Steel met steel. Blood spilled. And then, Robb drove his sword straight into the mountain's throat. For a second, silence. Then the monster fell. The crowd erupted, not in fear but in hope. The lion had sent her last weapon, and it had failed. The gates opened. The city surrendered. Cersei was taken in chains, dragged before the people she once ruled. Joffrey tried to run, but was caught in the crowd, screaming as rotten food rained down on him. Later that night, Robb stood before the Iron Throne. He didn't sit. Instead, he looked to the people and spoke. "No more lies, no more fire and blood. The North remembers, and now the realm will too." Cersei watched from her knees, bloodied, beaten, but still smiling. "You think this is over?" she whispered. Robb stared at her. "For you it is." And so, the war ended not with wildfire, but with a lie that became truth, a truth that became hope, and a king who never wanted the crown, but wore it better than those who bled for it. The lion roared, the wolf howled, and Westeros at last listened.